Christine Franke turns the key to her apartment door on October 24, 2001, completely unaware that a killer has been following her every step. In 30 seconds, she'll be dead. Shot execution style, in the back of the head, by a stranger, who will vanish into the night like a ghost. For 17 years, her family will beg for answers. For 17 years, her killer will sleep peacefully in his bed, raising his own children, living a normal life while Christine rots in the ground. He thinks he's untouchable. He thinks he's beaten the system. And he's wrong. This is the story of how science caught a monster who thought he'd committed the perfect murder. How a discarded cigarette butt brought down a killer. How the DNA evidence Christine's killer carelessly left behind became the weapon that finally destroyed his freedom. But first, you need to see how easily it could happen to someone you love. Christine Franke's fight for justice should never fade into silence. If you don't subscribe right now, you're allowing her story and the lessons it carries to be forgotten. Every view, every share, every comment keeps her voice alive. But doing nothing? That's choosing indifference. The same indifference that lets predators hide and victims disappear. Subscribe, like, and share this story, not for me, but for Christine, and for everyone who still needs a voice. Because silence doesn't protect the innocent, it protects the guilty. The woman about to experience the most terrifying moments of her life had no idea what was coming. Christine Franke wasn't just another college student. She was the kind of person who made you believe in goodness. At 25, she radiated the sort of warmth that drew people like moths to flame. Her laugh could fill a room. Her smile could melt the coldest heart. When Christine walked into a space, the energy shifted. People felt lighter, happier, more alive. Her parents, Robert and Carol, didn't just love their daughter. They were in awe of her. She'd transformed from their little girl into this brilliant, compassionate woman who seemed destined for greatness. Finance major at UCF, straight A student, but more than that, she was kind. Genuinely, deeply kind in a world that often rewards cruelty. Lockheed Martin had already seen her potential. They'd extended a job offer months before graduation, recognizing something special in Christine that went beyond grades and test scores. She had that rare combination of intelligence and heart that could change an industry. Her older brother Eric would lie awake at night after her death, haunted by memories of Sunday dinners where Christine's presence made everything perfect. She was the family's center of gravity, the one who remembered everyone's birthdays, who called just to check in, who made each person feel like they mattered. Just weeks before that night of absolute terror, Christine had been glowing with excitement about her new apartment, about her final semester, about the career waiting for her. She'd been making plans with her boyfriend Adam, talking about their future together. Life stretched ahead of her like an open highway. Endless possibilities, boundless potential. She was careful, responsible, smart. She chose a well-lit apartment complex. Always locked her doors, always told people her plans. She wasn't naive about danger. But nothing could have prepared her for the horror waiting in the darkness. What Christine didn't know was that October 24, 2001, would become a night of terror that would haunt everyone who loved her. A night when evil would strip away everything beautiful about her life in the span of 30 seconds. A night when her screams would echo in her family's nightmares for 17 years. The night Christine died started like a fairy tale. She'd spent the evening wrapped in Adam Stoker's arms at his apartment, just a few doors down from hers at Sun Bay. They talked about their future, laughed at inside jokes, shared the kind of intimate moments that make young couples believe they're invincible. Christine was radiant that night. Adam would replay every second in his mind for years, searching for signs he'd missed, warnings he'd ignored. At 10:30 p.m., Christine kissed him goodbye. "I'll text you when I get home," she promised, the same ritual they'd done dozens of times before. Adam watched from his doorway as she walked into the Florida darkness, her keys already in her hand, her steps confident and carefree. She had no idea Benjamin Holmes was watching her. The attack happened so fast, Christine barely had time to scream. As she turned her key in the lock, Holmes struck, forcing his way into her apartment, desperation driving him to violence. What he wanted was money. What he took was everything. The gunshot that ended Christine's life lasted less than a second. 25 years of dreams, hopes, and love gone in an instant. Holmes grabbed her purse and camera, then fled into the night, leaving Christine bleeding out on her apartment floor. Back at his apartment, Adam was getting worried. Christine always texted immediately. Always. When his phone stayed silent, a cold dread began creeping through his chest. Something was wrong. He found her door standing open, like a mouth screaming into the void. Adam's discovery of Christine's body would haunt him forever. The woman he loved reduced to a broken shell, her bright future extinguished by a stranger's greed. His anguished 911 call brought paramedics racing through the night, but they were far too late. The Sun Bay community was shattered. If Christine Franke, careful, smart, beloved Christine, could be murdered in her own doorway, then no one was safe. What they didn't know was that Christine's killer had already vanished without a trace. But what Christine's killer didn't know was that he'd left behind something that would eventually destroy him, something invisible. Something that would lie dormant for 17 years, waiting like a ticking time bomb. And when it finally exploded, it would obliterate everything he'd built since that night. His marriage, his freedom, his children's future. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and he had no idea the trap was already set. It only takes a moment for everything to change. If you think Christine's story deserves justice, don't just watch. Engage. Like, comment, share, and make sure this never fades from memory. While Christine's body was still warm, detectives were already hunting her killer. The crime scene told a brutal story. Christine's purse ripped from her hands. A single fingerprint left on papers scattered across her desk. DNA evidence clinging to the fabric of her stolen belongings. Orlando police swarmed Sun Bay apartments like bloodhounds, knocking on every door, questioning every resident, chasing every shadow. Detective after detective promised the Franke family the same thing. We will find who did this. But promises don't catch killers, and the evidence they'd collected led nowhere. The fingerprint matched no one in the system. The DNA profile sat in a database, waiting for a match that never came. Robert and Carol Franke became ghosts of themselves, calling the police station weekly, then daily, then desperately. Any updates? Any leads? Please, we just need to know. Their voices grew thinner with each unanswered call, their hope bleeding away like their daughter's life had on that apartment floor. Months turned into years. Christine's case file grew thick with dead ends. Hundreds of interviews that led nowhere. Tips that crumbled under investigation. Suspects who had solid alibis. The killer had vanished completely, as if he'd never existed at all. The detectives working Christine's case began to age under the weight of failure. They'd go home to their own families, haunted by the parents who trusted them to deliver justice. Some retired with Christine's case still burning in their conscience. Others transferred departments, unable to face another day of Robert Franke's desperate phone calls. The cold case unit inherited Christine's file like a cursed inheritance. They reopened it year after year, running the same evidence through new databases, hoping technology would catch up to their determination. But the results were always the same. No matches, no leads, no hope. By 2015, even the most optimistic detectives were starting to whisper what everyone feared. Christine Franke's killer would never be caught. He'd committed the perfect murder and was living free among them. probably with a family of his own, while Christine rotted in the ground. Robert and Carol were aging rapidly, their daughter's unsolved murder consuming them from the inside. They'd attended the funerals of other murder victims whose cases had been solved, watching families find closure they'd never have. But Christine's killer had made one fatal mistake 17 years earlier. What happened next would change everything. In 2017, a revolutionary forensic technique emerged that could resurrect the dead, not literally, but their DNA could speak from beyond the grave, and Christine Franke's DNA was about to scream her killer's name so loudly that the whole world would hear it. Benjamin Holmes's 17 years of peaceful sleep were about to become a nightmare he could never wake up from. After 17 years of silence, Christine Franke's DNA was about to speak. Detective Michael Fields stared at Christine's case file in 2017, the same evidence that had mocked investigators for 16 years. But this time, he had a weapon that hadn't existed when Christine died: genetic genealogy. This revolutionary technique could take a killer's DNA and trace it through generations of family trees, hunting down murderers through their own bloodline. Fields uploaded Christine's killer's DNA profile to GEDmatch, a public genealogy database where millions of people had voluntarily shared their genetic information to find long-lost relatives. What they didn't know was that they'd also become unwitting detectives in unsolved murders. The computer began its work, comparing the killer's DNA to thousands of profiles. Slowly, connections emerged: distant cousins, third and fourth relatives who shared genetic markers with Christine's murderer. Each match was a breadcrumb, leading back through time, through generations, toward a name. A professional genealogist joined the hunt, building family trees from these distant connections. Month after month, she traced bloodlines, cross-referenced birth certificates, death records, marriage licenses. The work was painstaking, methodical, but each generation brought them closer to their target. The family tree began to narrow, from hundreds of potential suspects to dozens, to a handful. Then, the breakthrough. 4 brothers, all the right age, all living in Orlando in 2001. One of them was Christine's killer. Benjamin Holmes emerged from the genetic shadows like a demon stepping into the light. 21 years old in 2001, living just miles from Christine's apartment. No criminal record, no connection to the victim, no reason for police to have ever looked at him. He was the perfect invisible predator. While detectives had been chasing ghosts for 17 years, Holmes had been living his life. He'd gotten married, had children, built a career. He probably thought about Christine sometimes, maybe even drove past her old apartment complex, smiling at the memory of the perfect crime he'd committed. But genetic genealogy doesn't care about perfect crimes. It only cares about DNA, and DNA never lies. Now they knew who he was, but they still needed proof. Benjamin Holmes had no idea that his entire world was about to collapse. While he went about his daily routine, coffee, work, family dinner, a team of detectives was preparing to destroy everything he'd built since that October night in 2001. They just needed him to make one simple mistake. This could have been someone you know, your community. If you want to keep this story alive, like, comment, and share. Don't let the silence win. Benjamin Holmes had no idea he was being hunted. For weeks, detectives followed him like shadows, watching his every move. They knew where he worked, where he bought coffee, where he dropped his kids off at school. Holmes lived the life of a typical suburban father, quiet, unremarkable, invisible. The perfect disguise for a killer who'd been hiding in plain sight for 17 years. The surveillance team waited patiently for their moment. They needed his DNA, but they couldn't just ask for it. They had to catch him discarding something naturally, legally. Every cigarette butt he threw away, every cup he tossed in the trash. They were watching. Then it happened. Holmes stopped at a gas station, bought a drink, finished it, and casually threw the cup away. To him, it was nothing. To detectives, it was everything. The moment that plastic cup hit the trash, 17 years of freedom were about to end. The lab results came back like a death sentence. Perfect match. The DNA on that discarded cup belonged to the same man who'd left his genetic signature on Christine Franke's purse in 2001. The hunter had finally caught his prey. September 11, 2018. Benjamin Holmes was at work when police officers walked through the door. His coworkers watched in stunned silence as their quiet, mild-mannered colleague was placed in handcuffs. Murder, kidnapping, armed robbery. The charges hit like hammer blows. Holmes's wife collapsed when police told her the truth. The man she'd shared a bed with for years was a killer. Her children's father had executed a young woman before they were even born. Everything she thought she knew about her life was a lie. Meanwhile, Robert and Carol Franke received the call they'd been waiting 17 years to hear. Christine's killer had been caught. The relief was overwhelming, but it came wrapped in tragedy. Their daughter was still gone, and no arrest could bring her back. The quiet suburban neighborhood where Holmes lived erupted in shock. Neighbors who'd waved hello to him for years suddenly realized they'd been living next to a monster. But Holmes wasn't going down without a fight. The arrest was just the beginning of another battle, one that would drag on for 5 more years as Holmes' lawyers tried every trick in the book to set their client free. The Franke family's nightmare was far from over. 5 years later, Benjamin Holmes still believed he could beat the system one last time. The trial delays were torture for the Franke family. COVID-19 postponements, legal motions, defense tactics. Every delay meant more sleepless nights, more dreams of Christine, more wondering if justice would ever truly come. Robert and Carol Franke had already waited 22 years. How much more could their hearts endure? When the trial finally began in October 2023, the courtroom was electric with tension. Holmes sat at the defense table, no longer the invisible suburban father, but a caged predator facing his reckoning. The Franke family sat directly behind the prosecution, their eyes burning holes through the man who'd destroyed their world. The prosecution's case was devastating. They didn't just present DNA evidence, they painted a portrait of a serial predator. Holmes had committed multiple armed robberies in the same area around Christine's murder, a pattern of escalating violence that culminated in killing an innocent young woman. The DNA evidence was unshakable, connecting him directly to Christine's purse, to the crime scene, to her final moments of terror. But Holmes' defense team fought like cornered animals. They attacked the DNA evidence, claiming contamination. They questioned the chain of custody from 2001. They suggested the evidence had been mishandled, corrupted, planted, anything to create reasonable doubt in the jurors' minds. The jury wasn't buying it. After just a few hours of deliberation, barely enough time to order lunch, they returned with their verdict. Guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, kidnapping, armed burglary, armed robbery. Holmes' face remained stone-cold as each guilty verdict hammered down like nails in his coffin. December 1st, 2023. Sentencing day. The moment the Franke family had dreamed of for over 2 decades. Robert Franke rose to address the court, his voice shaking with 22 years of suppressed rage and grief. "You took our daughter, our light, our future," he said, staring directly at Holmes. "This verdict won't bring Christine back, but it ensures you'll never hurt another family the way you've hurt ours." The judge's words were final. Life in prison, no parole, no second chances, no escape. Holmes was led away in shackles, his freedom gone forever. But this wasn't just about one family's justice. Christine Franke's case was about to become something much bigger. A beacon of hope for thousands of other families still waiting in the darkness, still believing that science could reach across decades to deliver the justice their loved ones deserved. Christine Franke's death saved lives she'll never know about. Her case became the blueprint that law enforcement agencies worldwide now follow. The genetic genealogy techniques that caught Benjamin Holmes have since solved hundreds of cold cases, rapists dragged from decades of hiding, killers who thought they'd escape justice forever, families finally getting the closure they'd given up hoping for. Robert and Carol Franke transformed their grief into a mission. They didn't just mourn their daughter. They became warriors for justice, speaking at conferences, supporting other grieving families, ensuring Christine's name became synonymous with never giving up. Every time they told her story, another detective somewhere decided to reopen an old case file. The Franke family's resilience became legendary among victim advocacy groups. They showed the world what love looks like when it refuses to surrender. 22 years of phone calls to detectives, 22 years of attending court hearings for other victims, 22 years of keeping Christine's memory burning bright in a world that wanted to forget. But Christine's legacy extends far beyond her own case. Her DNA didn't just catch one killer. It revolutionized how we hunt monsters. Police departments that had given up on cold cases suddenly had new hope. Families who'd been told, "There's nothing more we can do," were getting phone calls they'd never expected to receive. The technology that solved Christine's murder is now solving cases from the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s. Serial killers who terrorized entire communities are being pulled from their comfortable retirement lives. Rapists who'd been living next door to new victims are finally facing justice. Every solved case creates a ripple effect. Every arrest prevents future victims. Every conviction gives hope to families still waiting in the darkness. Christine Franke didn't just get justice, she became justice for thousands of others. Her story proves that evil can hide, but it can never truly escape. That love is stronger than death. That technology can reach across decades to speak for the voiceless. But there's something else Christine's case revealed that should terrify every criminal still walking free. If you think this story ends with Benjamin Holmes rotting in prison, you're wrong. Christine Franke's legacy is just beginning, and the monsters still hiding in plain sight have no idea what's coming for them. Her story was hidden for so long, but together we can ensure it's never forgotten. Like, share, comment, and keep this story alive. Justice may be delayed, but it's never too late. Christine Franke should be alive today. She should be celebrating her 48th birthday this year, surrounded by children who never got to be born, grandparents who never got to spoil them, a husband who never got to grow old with her. She should be leading teams at Lockheed Martin, changing the aerospace industry, making the world better with that brilliant mind and compassionate heart. Instead, she's frozen forever at 25, young, beautiful, full of dreams that will never come true. But her voice refuses to be silenced. Every time someone shares her story, Christine speaks from beyond the grave. Every time genetic genealogy solves another cold case, she's there, pushing science forward, demanding justice for the forgotten. Every time a family gets closure they'd given up hoping for, Christine's spirit is in that moment. The monsters walking among us think they're safe. They're not. Christine Franke's legacy is hunting them, one DNA sample at a time. Her fight for justice didn't end when Benjamin Holmes was sentenced to life in prison. It's just getting started. Closing CTA. If you believe her story deserves to be heard, make your voice count. Like, subscribe, and share. Because silence never protects the innocent, it protects the guilty.